You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. And pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good. He sends his rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brethren only, what do you do more than others? Do not even the tax collectors do so? Therefore, you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect. The passage I just read to you was Matthew 5:43 through 48, which is a part of the Sermon on the Mount, which we have been studying and preparing sermons on for the past week. The Sermon on the Mount is one of the most quoted passages of Scripture in the world. It includes the Beatitudes, the model prayer, and much more. But this evening, I want to dissect these 6 verses and see what Jesus meant when he said these words. Starting in verse 43, we see Jesus start to quote the Old Testament, and he's ushering in a new era of law. He says in verse 43, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Nothing major is said in this verse, but it seems like a logical response, right? I mean, if Blake just came up to me right now and punched me in the face, would you say I had an excuse to say I hate Devin? Or, Blake. No, I don't. Because back in verses 21 and 22 of chapter 5, we read, You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment. But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Raka, shall be in danger of the council. But whoever says, you fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. So you might ask, what is the correct response to this situation? Well, Jesus said in verse 44 of Matthew chapter 5, But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. So Jesus perfectly outlines what we're supposed to do. So no, I cannot punch Blake in the face because he punched me. Because in Matthew chapter 5:39, it also says, But I tell you not to resist an evil person. But whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. So why? Why should we turn the other cheek? Why should we bless those who curse us? Why should we do good to those who hate us and pray for those who hurt us? Well, the answer is quite simple. In the very next verse 45, we read, That you may be sons of your Father in heaven, for he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. So there you have it. Now you know that bad things happen to good people. God treats all people the same, because the sun and the rain shines and falls on everybody. But with these last couple verses combined, we see a similar quality. Love. But it's a different kind of love, because as we see in verses 46 and 47, for if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Jesus blatantly says in verses 46 and 47, love your brothers, but love others the exact same way. Because if you only love your brother, you're no better than the tax collectors. And finally, we have verse 48. This verse ends the passage of Scripture by saying, Therefore, you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect. So if you love your enemies, if you bless those who curse you, if you do good to those who hate you, if you pray for those who persecute you, if you love your neighbor, if you love strangers just like your brothers, if you do all these things, you will be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect, as Jesus was perfect. I'm going to tell you, it's not going to be easy to do all these things. It's as the great boxer Muhammad Ali once said, he who is not courageous enough to take risks will accomplish nothing in life. But wait, you may be asking, what is an example of this perfectness? How could I possibly know what to look for as an example? Earlier this week, we saw a short video on the Nickel Mines shooting. Gunman Charles Carl Roberts IV took hostages and shot 10 girls aged 16 to 13, killing 5 before committing suicide inside the schoolhouse. Once inside the school, Janice Ballinger, the coroner on scene, said there was not one desk, not one chair in the entire schoolroom that was not splattered with either blood or glass. There were bullet holes everywhere. Everywhere. The emphasis on forgiveness and reconciliation was widely, in the Amish community's response, was widely discussed in the national media. The West Nickel Mines School was torn down, and a new one-room schoolhouse, the New Hope School, was built at another location. The Amish set up a charitable fund for the family of the shooter as well. About 30 members of the Amish community attended Roberts' funeral. And Marie Roberts, the widow of the killer, was just one of the few outsiders invited to the funeral of one of the victims. Isn't that just amazing? He shot and killed 5 people, then killed himself. And they just forgave him? How? How in the world is that possible? I'll tell you how it's possible. They followed the idea of Matthew 5:43 through 48. It's also what we should do. This is a remarkable example of forgiveness. And this world would be a better world, dare I even say, a perfect world, if we all learned how to forgive. So I challenge you, take this passage to heart, because if you do these things, you will be perfect, as your Father in heaven is perfect.